Welcome to episode 2 of World Figure 8 Wednesday. It's Wednesday, January 21st, 2026. I'm your host, Scott Nigh. World Figure 8 Wednesday will be your weekly show to talk about the greatest figure 8 race on the planet, the World Figure 8 Championship 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. This year's event, the 50th annual edition that pays $50,000 to win, will be on Saturday night, September 12th, right here at the Indianapolis Speedrome. We're going to talk about lots of things in this episode for the World Figure 8 Championship, and stay tuned later on in the episode. We're going to have some exciting news to bring to you about this year's event. Before we get on to that, I want to remind you to like and share this video on all your social media platforms, and also go to our YouTube channel, the Indianapolis Speedrome YouTube channel. Like and subscribe and comment there as well too. Stay tuned here on World Figure 8 Wednesday. As mentioned, this World Figure 8 Wednesday show is going to be something you'll see every Wednesday, and it'll be posted on our YouTube channel. And it's going to be a chance for us to talk about the greatest figure 8 race on the planet on a weekly basis, instead of just as the season goes on till we get to July or August. So it's going to be something cool to talk about all year long. And of course, it's going to have lots of things featured in it throughout the season. My specialty, statistics, is going to be part of it. We're going to bring you a lot of history from the event over the 50-year course of the 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. We're also going to have lots of cool announcements on all the neat things that are coming up and that are going to be special to this 50th anniversary edition of the event. We're also going to bring breaking news to it, which you never know what that could be throughout the year. We're going to talk about driver entries as the season goes along. Drivers will be letting us know they're going to be here to compete in the World Figure 8 Championship, so we're going to announce those as the season goes along. We're also going to conduct some interviews during the year with different drivers and sponsors and people related to the event to promote them and their interest in the sport of figure 8 racing and the World Figure 8 Championship. We're also going to show you some past video clips of the event to kind of bring you some of the history for some of you newcomers to the 3-hour figure 8 championship. So talk about that throughout the season. Also, something that I'm going to be working very hard on is bringing you the 50 greatest drivers from the 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. That's going to be hard to figure out who those folks are and just how they're going to rank. And it'll be exciting and something to talk about throughout the season. So we're going to bring you that during the year as well. We're also going to spotlight a lot of the sponsors that it takes to bring you an event like this. And if you're interested in being a sponsor for the World Figure 8 Championship or for anything here at the Indianapolis Speedrome throughout 2026, give us a call at 317-353-8206, and we can figure out something to help you be a part of the Speedrome Nation and our figure 8 racing team here at the Indianapolis Speedrome. So in general, this show is just to talk about this important race to folks about figure 8 racing and the 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. So stay tuned all season long here on World Figure 8 Wednesday.
Fireworks high into the air. Now Riddle, he spun up before the line, and he's going to lose a lap at the start potentially.
Drive-through, and we got Frost, who just got on the track, but now he's stalling near the intersection, and they are trying to get around. Not a good spot for Frost.
This could be our first. Nope. Caution
Yellow.
is out.
Yellow flag.
Right as he got it started, but the problem is also there's a look into the pits. Off to Tunney, driving away.
It will be Mark Tunney and Dalton Connor. Oh, 3 wide and some contact there with Norton. We're going to try to go 3 wide here. We got a couple cars starting to park it in the middle of the track. See the 77 sitting there in the middle. We got a spin. It's Frost in the 71. Frost brought out our first yellow. I think he's just helping out his alternate buddies. He's like, I got you guys covered. Don't worry. We got a big issue for the 40 of Greenwell. His right front busted on that car. And we'll see if this ends up bringing out our next yellow.
If you're like myself, you love figure 8 racing. And there are plenty of great figure eight races all over this country that conducted each and every weekend throughout the United States. But there's only one 3-hour figure eight endurance race, and it's the pinnacle of the sport. And it's on every driver's bucket list to compete in, and on every fanatical fan's list of races to attend each and every year. So that got me to thinking of the things that I love, what I really love about the 3-hour figure eight endurance race and what makes it different from other figure eight races. And I've jotted down a few things here on the computer to talk to you about that. One of the facts that I like to talk about the 3-hour figure eight is it's the only race in the world that you can not be on the starting grid and you can not take the checkered flag, but yet still win the race because it's counting the most amount of laps completed. Now, while nobody yet has been able to do that, there are drivers that have finished second in the race that have not been running at the checkered flag, and there are drivers that have finished third in the race that weren't in the original starting field that came out of the alternates line. So the uniqueness of that fact is just something that's special about this event. Also, what's great about the 3 hours is the melting pot of drivers. It's very cool to see drivers from all four corners of the United States converging here at the Indianapolis Speedrome to compete in this figure eight race. That always makes it interesting at the intersection when these drivers maybe are not too familiar with each other, have to make those split-second decisions twice every lap to get through that intersection while competing for prizes and the prestige of being the world figure eight champion. So that's what's always cool to check out each year at the 3-hour figure eight race. Another fact that's great is that everyone gets to compete. At many big races, guys come and qualify, and maybe there's a finite number of cars that make the feature event. With the format of the World Figure Eight Championship 3-hour figure eight endurance race, everybody gets to compete. We're going to start 28 cars this September 12th, 2026, but yet all the other cars will be in the alternates line and will get added to the race as it goes on and cars fall out. Those cars that fall out then get to fix themselves and get back into the race and join the race to make the field even bigger as it goes on. And that's one of the great uniqueness of the 3-hour figure eight endurance race, the fact that every single car that comes will enter the race at some point. Another unique thing about the race is the clock. While there's other timed races throughout the country, we have a great one here called the 1-hour figure eight endurance race. The clock is just something that's unique. So each race has its own flow to it. Sometimes it might be a 350 lap race, and just like last year, it was an over 500 lap race. So you can never set your strategy in stone what you're going to do there because you never know how long the race is going to go in laps. The time is finite, but the number of laps is what's fluid throughout the deal. That's very cool. Another unique thing is pit stops. While on a regular night, you may end up coming into the pits from time to time and fixing your car and going about racing, but it usually doesn't figure in the strategy of the event. This race being as long as it is, nobody's going to make the distance on fuel, and everybody will need to change tires to compete for the victory. So the pit stop is very important, so your crews are very important to get through, and we've seen that more and more over the last few years of this event. Where early on, in the early days, the very first race had a mandatory stoppage every 50 laps. We don't do that anymore. But everybody has to figure out when to make that pit stop, and it's very important. Another cool thing about the 3-hour figure eight race is driving styles of the drivers. Drivers that are maybe more of a patient style have to learn how to go more hard charging than they normally do on a regular event, and those hard charging guys have to learn to add some patience into the mix as well. And where that comes out at the end of the race is always cool to see how it works out. Sometimes the patience guys win out, sometimes the hard charging guys win out, sometimes it's somewhere meeting in the middle, which you don't want to do in the figure eight races. So those are just some of the things I love about the uniqueness of the 3-hour figure eight race. So I'd like to hear from you guys what you think is cool about the 3-hour figure eight endurance race. So you can post those in the comments and let us know what your favorite things are about the 3-hour figure eight endurance race.
Kitley and Brookville Road. They called it the Speedrome. The track flourished and fathered many a great racing driver. In 1952, figure 8 racing was invented at the Speedrome. The 60s saw the great A.J. Foyt at the Speedrome. Lloyd Ruby has mile after mile of racing there. And many second-generation racing greats like Johnny Parsons Jr., Billy Vukovich Jr., and Gary Bentonhausen all have raced this short track on the southeast side. In the 70s, the track began to decay, but then was bought by John Stiles, whose fortunes came with the CB radio craze. And using monies from his American Electronics, he nurtured the old track back to life.
I guess it was part of growing up near the Indianapolis 500 Speedway and spending a lot of my time as a 10, 11, 12-year-old riding my bicycle over to the old 16th Street Speedway, where I spent a lot of Friday, Saturday evenings, and I enjoyed that, and I guess I've always just sort of wanted to buy a racetrack. We worked very, very hard. We worked a lot of long hours and put a lot of money in it, and it's really much more than we ever anticipated. Then we added the new grandstands and new scoreboard. We put up, for the safety of the spectators, a very elaborate wheel fence, and we tried our very best to clean the place up so it physically was something that was attractive and people would bring their families and enjoy.
You pass rather casually over things like a new scoreboard. It's not just a scoreboard, it's awfully special.
Well, it is. We worked awfully hard in tying the scoreboard into our computer system and being able to come up with a electronic timing system and coming up with information that people need at a racetrack. I know I've been to many racetracks where the whole race is run and if you weren't listening to the radio, if it weren't on radio or something, you wouldn't even know what was going on. So we decided early that one of the things we wanted to do was that we wanted to be able to tell the people what was going on. We run more racing events here than any other track in the United States, at least oval track. We had 83 racing programs last year, and that's a lot of nights. Last year we ran Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturday, and Sundays. This year we're running Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, and we're still the most active racetrack in the United States.
He used to make most of his money buying Japanese electronic products, selling them here. Now the yen, it's not quite what it used to be, so the Speedrome is going to have to pay off for John Stiles.
Well, I hope it does.
How cool was that clip right there? That come from 1977 broadcast on WTHR with John Stiles, which is his first year of Speedrome track ownership. And your segment host there was the future voice of the Indianapolis 500, Paul Page, who was also a competitor in the first two 3-hour figure 8 endurance races. Want to give a shout out to John Stiles Racing YouTube page for that clip right there. And that leads us into this segment of this show. With this being our first full show of World Figure 8 Wednesday, what better time to talk about the very first 3-hour figure 8 endurance race? And that race was held in 1977. Of course, track owner John Stiles put that together. The race, when announced that it was going to happen, many people said it's a race that could never be run. Cars wouldn't last that long. Drivers couldn't stay mentally focused that long, because normal figure 8 races across the country were 25, 50, maybe even 100 laps, but 3 hours in duration was something that people just thought never ever could be something that happened, but it did. It was a cold and blustery October afternoon that saw a total of 73 cars show up to compete for the first ever 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. Those cars came from Michigan, Kentucky, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, and of course Indiana, all on hand here at the Speedrome to vie for the title of National Figure 8 Champion. Of the 73 total cars that came to complete, 57 would ended up turning laps in that 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. First place on hand for people to grab was $3,000, which was a pretty snazzy award for winning a race like that. That $3,000, if you use the inflation calculator, that's $16,500 in today's money. So a pretty darn good payday there in 1977. The format was just a little bit different than what we are used to these days. There was a mandatory red flag every 50 continuous laps of running. That gave everyone a chance to head pit side to the pits, to have their crews take a look over their cars, give the driver some refreshment, and maybe even slip in a relief driver. Relief drivers were pretty common in those early days of the 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. Sometimes you'd see one driver start, another driver finish the car, or sometimes multiple drivers would switch in and out during these stops. But one thing that happened is these mandatory red flags did make the time go a lot longer. That's why this race is the only one that never made it to the full distance of 3 hours. It was stopped after 1 hour and 48 minutes of competition. But the reason that it got to stop was snow. That early first two 3-hour figure 8 endurance races were held in October, and we got an early snow shower. It was very cold that year, so the race ended up ending early that year. There were 21 out-of-town drivers that were ready for the challenge that first 1977 year. Kentucky's Ron Hargesheimer would win the very first event pole position with a lap of 19.908 seconds, and that was a full half-second faster than his fellow front-row starter, Sonny Thompson, from here at the Indianapolis Speedrome. Michigan's Chuck Hall, the previous year's World Figure 8 champion at Islip Speedway, would lead the very first laps in the 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. Hall would go on to lead 139 of the first 147 laps before turning the top spot over to fellow Michigander Bob Bells, who led for 56 laps. Hargesheimer would also lead during this early stages. In fact, those out-of-town drivers would impressively lead all but 55 of the laps in the first ever 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. Jim Tunney, a familiar last name, was the first Speedrome driver to ever lead a lap in the 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. Recently crowned Speedrome track champion Jim Fox would lead the final 50 circuits, putting his name in the record books as the first ever winner of the 3-hour figure 8 endurance race. Again, that race ended early that day, and it was the only one that didn't make it the full 3-hour time period. But it was such a cool event, and to see how history started back then, it was a menagerie of cars from all over across the country, and something special that's still in our hearts here 50 years later. That's your look back at the very first 3-hour figure 8 endurance race back in 1977. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this episode of World Figure 8 Wednesday. And speaking of Wednesday, that leads us into our announcement for this week's show about the upcoming World Figure 8 Championship. The World Figure 8 Championship has been a 3-day event for many years now, but it's going to get expanded to 4 this year. Things are going to kick off on Wednesday night, September the 9th, with open practice for the World Figure 8 cars. On that night, that's going to kick off the weekend with plenty of open practice for all the teams and drivers coming out. Plus, we're going to have a full program of racing for the Legend cars on Wednesday night, September the 9th, 2026. And that's going to kick off our 4 days of the World Figure 8 Championship, which leads us to day number 2. And that will be Thursday night. The old first night of the World Figure 8 Championship will now be night number 2. And on that night, you're going to see something that's never, ever happened on Thursday night in 3-hour figure 8 racing World Figure 8 Championship competition. There will be qualification attempts on Thursday night. Single car qualification attempts on Thursday night at the end of the program. Plenty of open practice that night for the World Figure 8 cars will lead you up until the single car qualifying at the end of the program. Also on Thursday night, September 10th card, we'll be racing for the Ford division on the oval. So plenty of cool stuff. So all you folks looking to attend the World Figure 8 Championship, you want to make sure you're here for all 4 days of this year's event. More things to make the 50th anniversary 3-hour figure 8 race and World Figure 8 Championship weekend special. Again, things kicking off on Wednesday night, September 9th, with open practice for the World Figure 8 cars plus Legend racing, and then Thursday night, open practice plus racing for the Fords on the oval, leading up to single car qualification attempts at the end of the evening. So exciting stuff about the World Figure Eight Championship, and you're going to want to stay tuned each and every week to this World Figure Eight Wednesday show, where we'll keep passing along more breaking news and exciting stuff leading up to the event each and every Wednesday here on the Indianapolis Speedrome YouTube channel. Please subscribe to that YouTube channel so you know when that stuff gets to you first. Also, share this stuff on social media with all your friends and let them know that the World Figure Eight Championship is a can't-miss event that you need to be at this year. So please like and subscribe to all those social media channels and the YouTube page. Also want to remind you that if you're interested in sponsoring the World Figure Eight Championship or any of our classes or events during the 2026 racing season, I know the guy for you to contact. That guy is Jackson Mears. Jackson Mears will be here in the pit office most days, and you could call him at 317-353-8206. He's got plenty of cool sponsorship packages and lots of details he could talk to you with about getting involved in speedrome racing and the World Figure Eight Championship. So thanks again for tuning in, folks, and we'll see you next Wednesday here on World Figure Eight Wednesday here at the Indianapolis Speedrome.